Imagine this. You're standing in that room. It's stuffy, it smells of oil and old papyrus. You're on the northern coast of what we now call Turkey, in the Roman province of Bithynia Pontus. The year is 112 AD. The man pacing the floor is Gaius Plinius Caecilius Secundus. We know him as Pliny the Younger. He's not some backwater administrator. He's a sharp, respected Roman lawyer, a man of letters, and now the personal governor for the Emperor Trajan. He's a man who solves problems. But tonight, he has a problem he can't solve. A new kind of problem that's been spreading through his province like what he calls a contagion. He's been dragging locals into his makeshift courtroom all week. They're accused of belonging to an illegal political association, but it's weirder than that. They're accused of being Christians. And Pliny, for all his education and legal experience, has no idea what that really means. He picks up his stylus and begins to compose a letter to his boss, the most powerful man in the world. He needs guidance. You can almost hear him thinking, what do I do with these people? What is their actual crime? He explains that after interrogating them and even torturing two female slaves they called deaconesses, he's found no evidence of any real crimes. No theft, no fraud, no adultery. Instead, he writes that their entire fault seems to be this: that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsively a hymn to Christ as to a god. Now, for centuries, believers and Christian apologists have pointed to this very letter. They hold it up triumphantly and say, see, proof. A Roman official, a non-Christian, writing just a few decades after the supposed event, confirms Christians existed and worshiped Christ. This proves Jesus was real. But does it? Or does this letter, when you actually read it and when you understand the man who wrote it, tell a completely different story? A story that, far from being the bedrock proof of a historical Jesus, actually makes the man from Nazareth even less likely. Let's find out. All right, so let's put this supposedly rock-solid evidence under the microscope. Apologists love to quote Pliny, but they usually only give you one specific line, presented as if it's the final word. So let's look at that line together. They asserted, however, that the sum and substance of their fault or error had been that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsively a hymn to Christ as to a god. There it is. That's the smoking gun. For many, this is case closed. But we're the rational Farid, so we don't close cases that easily. Let's put on our rational caps and break this down like a legal document, which is, by the way, exactly what Pliny, the lawyer, was writing. 1. What does this passage actually tell us? It tells us that around the year 112, in this one Roman province, there was a group of people who identified as Christians. Okay, fine, no dispute there. And it says they worshipped a figure named Christos. Again, noted, it's a data point. 2, and this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the exact wording. They sing a hymn to Christ as to a god. The original Latin is quasi deo. That little phrase is everything. This isn't historical reporting. Pliny is describing their theology. He's saying they treat this Christos figure like a deity, the way other cults in the empire worship Mithras or Isis or Dionysus. It's a statement about their religious practice, not about the historical status of their deity. He's not saying they worship a man from Judea who recently became a god. He's saying they sing to this Christ character as if he were a god. See the difference? And 3, and this is the most important part of all, think about what is profoundly, definitely missing from this account. There is no mention of Jesus. The name isn't there. There's no mention of Nazareth or Galilee. There's no Pontius Pilate, no Caiaphas, no crucifixion under the Emperor Tiberius. There are no apostles, no miracles, no Sermon on the Mount. Absolutely none of the biographical details that would anchor this divine Christos to a specific historical man who supposedly lived and died in Judea just 80 years ago. All Pliny is doing here is relaying what these arrested people told him they believed. He's a court reporter taking down a statement, not a historian verifying a biography. And what they believe, according to this letter, is in a celestial divine being they call Christos, to whom they sing hymns. That's the entire testimony. It's powerful evidence for a second century belief, but it's a ghost of an argument for a first-century person. Before we go any further, there's a little footnote to this story, a bit of historical housekeeping we need to address. We have to ask the question, can we even be sure this letter is authentic? See, Pliny was a meticulous author. He personally curated, edited, and prepared 247 of his letters for publication in 9 books. He was crafting his own legacy. But our famous letter about the Christians, it's not in those 9 books. It's from a separate collection, Book 10, which contains his official correspondence with Emperor Trajan. And here's the catch. Book 10 was published posthumously and anonymously. We don't have the same level of certainty about it as we do for the works Pliny published himself. In fact, the translator for the Penguin edition of the letters, Betty Radis, even notes that it's surprising that more of this official correspondence wasn't found in the imperial files. It just kind of appears. For a historian, that raises a little red flag. Now, to be intellectually honest, we have to look at the evidence from the other side. About a century after Pliny, a fiery Christian writer named Tertullian wrote a defense of the faith. And in it, he clearly references this exact exchange. He mentions Pliny, the province he governed, his confusion about the Christians, and the advice he sought from the emperor. Because Tertullian discusses it, most scholars, even very skeptical ones, tend to agree that the correspondence is probably genuine. A later Christian writer wouldn't invent a story that made his religion look like a depraved, excessive superstition to the Romans. So where does that leave us? For the sake of argument, let's just give the apologists this point. Let's put a pin in the authenticity debate and assume the letter is 100% real, exactly as written. Let's proceed as if it's an undisputed historical document. Because the real problem for their argument isn't whether the letter is a forgery. The real, devastating problem for the story of Jesus is Pliny himself and what this letter reveals about what he didn't know. So, who was this Pliny guy, really? Was he just some low-level bureaucrat in a forgotten corner of the empire who wouldn't be expected to know what was going on? Far from it. This is where the story gets truly fascinating. Let's follow his career path, shall we? Pliny starts his career as a top-tier lawyer in Rome, the bustling, gossiping heart of the entire empire. He's not just there, he's a major player. Then, he serves on the imperial military staff in Syria. Let that sink in. Syria, the region right next to Judea, the place we are told was a seething hotbed of early Christian activity, where the movement supposedly had its first major boom. Pliny is right there, at the center of Roman power in the region. And yet, not a peep. No diary entries, no letters home about this world-changing new faith. Nothing. He returns to Rome and his career explodes. He rises through the ranks, prosecuting corrupt governors and massive high-profile public trials. He becomes a senator. He becomes a consul, which is like being the co-president of the entire Roman Republic for a year. He's even appointed a state priest for the official Roman religion. And to top it all off, his social circle included the 2 most famous Roman historians of his day, Tacitus and Suetonius. This man was not just in the system. He was the system. He was at the very heart of the Roman Empire's legal, political, and information network for decades. And yet, after all that, after a lifetime spent at the apex of Roman power and knowledge, when he finally stumbles across this small group in Bithynia, what does he do? He writes to the emperor like a confused intern asking for the office rulebook. You can almost feel his confusion through the page. He pens this incredible line. Having never been present at any trials concerning those persons who are Christians, I am unacquainted with the nature of their crimes or the measure of their punishment. He's clueless. This top lawyer has to ask what the charges even are. You can feel his professional frustration. He gets so desperate for basic information that he resorts to a horrifying act. He tortures 2 female slaves, the deaconesses, just to figure out what is going on. And even then, all he can conclude is that it's just depraved, excessive superstition. Doesn't this strike you as Bizarre? Let's be logical. If a man named Jesus had been publicly executed by the Roman state, if his followers had caused riots and spread a movement so powerful it reached Rome itself, if those followers had then been horrifically and famously persecuted by the Emperor Nero in Rome, an event Pliny would have lived through as a child with a high-ranking guardian, how could this man, of all people, know nothing? There's only one explanation that fits all the facts. The story we've been told is a fable. The Christians Pliny encountered weren't the inheritors of a world-changing historical movement. They were just another tiny, insignificant mystery cult that until that moment hadn't even registered on Rome's radar. So, as a piece of evidence for a historical Jesus, Pliny's letter is a spectacular failure. His ignorance is the real story. Case closed, right? Well, not quite. Because its real value, the truly stunning part of this historical snapshot, isn't in Pliny's confused questions. It's in the reply he gets from his boss, the Emperor Trajan. While Pliny is flustered and asking for instructions, Trajan's response is a masterclass in calm, measured Roman jurisprudence. It's so clear and logical, I'm just going to break down his instructions for you. 1. Trajan establishes a don't ask, don't tell policy. He explicitly tells Pliny they are not to be sought out. No witch hunts, no sending spies into communities to root out Christians. The Roman state has better things to do. They will only act if a formal, public accusation is made. 2. He creates a simple, clear path to pardon. If someone is accused, all they have to do is deny they are a Christian and offer a pinch of incense to the Roman gods. If they do that, Trajan says, even though he was under suspicion in the past, he shall obtain pardon through repentance. That's it. It's about civic loyalty, not thought policing. But this last one, this is the one that should make you stop and think. 3. Trajan gives this incredible instruction regarding accusations. He writes, anonymously posted accusations ought to have no place in any prosecution, for this is both a dangerous kind of precedent and out of keeping with the spirit of our age. Just let that sink in. The pagan Roman emperor in 112 AD is banning anonymous accusations because they are beneath the dignity of their legal system. It's a dangerous precedent, and it doesn't fit the enlightened spirit of their age. Now, jump forward 13 centuries to the height of Christian power in Europe. Think of the Inquisition. What was their standard operating procedure? Seeking people out was their entire job. They were literally heretic hunters. Anonymous accusations weren't just allowed, they were encouraged. They were the fuel for the entire machine. And a clear path to pardon? It was often a confusing nightmare of confession and counter-accusation. The very document that apologists hold up as their best external proof for Jesus is in fact a shining testament to the legal and ethical principles of the pagan Rome they so often demonize. It shows a system far more concerned with due process and justice than the one that would later be built in the name of their Christ. Their evidence doesn't prove their founder, but it does prove that the spirit of their age was in many ways far more rational than the one that followed. So, let's circle back to the question we started with. Is Pliny the Younger the rock-solid, non-Christian witness for a historical Jesus? Absolutely not. When you actually read the letter and understand the man who wrote it, the case completely falls apart. He isn't a witness to a man from Galilee. He's a witness to a small, obscure sect in the 2nd century that worshipped a celestial being they called Christos. He's a witness to his own profound confusion. His ignorance, coming from one of the most well-connected men in the Roman Empire, speaks louder than anything he actually wrote down. And most of all, he and his boss, Emperor Trajan, are unwitting witnesses to a level of Roman tolerance and legal principle, banning anonymous accusations that puts later religious fanaticism to shame. The evidence isn't what they tell you it is. You just have to be willing to look past the dogma and read what the sources actually say. What do you think? Did you ever hear this side of the story in church? Or was Pliny just presented as simple proof? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many as I can. And if you enjoy examining history with a rational eye and you think these kinds of deep dives are important,
You know what to do. Hit that like button to help the video out, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next investigation. I'm Farid, and this is The Rational Farid. Stay curious.